Live streaming is on.
So, welcome everyone to our webinar, The Responsibility of Tech Companies in the Elections. In a year full of elections around the world, our interest as digital citizenship grew to observe how tech companies and tech platforms, they are infiltrating all aspects of our lives and how they would engage to protect the end users, to protect us from harmful and misleading content in a critical moment such as elections in every country. And thus, we are hosting this webinar today with experts from our region, from the MENA region, who are working hard on addressing this matter. Dear listeners and tuners, I am Emna Mizouni, CEO of Digital Citizenship, and I'm joined today by Mona Shtaye and George Salame and Ashraf Awadi to discuss the responsibility of tech companies in the elections. We will start with Mona. Mona is the campaigns and partnership manager and corporate engagement lead at Digital Action. She's also a 2024 Migration and Technology Monitor Fellow and a non-resident scholar for the Middle East Institute in the Palestine-Israel program. Mona has been working for a decade in nonprofit organizations to enhance transparency and integrity and hold governments and big tech companies accountable. Her advocacy and campaigning has resulted in exposing digital discrimination against oppressed people, building coalitions and mobilizing groups toward holding governments and tech giants accountable. Impressive. So, Mona will be presenting to us the Global Coalition for Tech Justice. What is this coalition? What they are doing? And tell us the role of tech companies in the countries they observed in the first quarter of 2024. Welcome, Mona, and after you.
Thank you so much, Emna, and it's really lovely to be here today. So I'm glad that I'm joining this great panel and great speakers. So thanks for digital citizenship. To start with, I'm going to be speaking about the first half of the year because we are already over the first quarter. We are in June, and the first 6 months of the year are over, almost over. And I'll start introducing the Global Coalition for Tech Justice. The Global Coalition for Tech Justice is a coalition that is working to protect people and democracy from tech harms. The coalition was established last year, and Digital Action, where I work, is a convener for this coalition. We focus on bridging the gap between the global north and the global majority countries, since, as most of us know, tech platforms are emerging in global north countries. However, their tech harms are exacerbating the situation in global majority countries where there are no regulations, where there are no frameworks that shape the work. So people in global majority countries are left behind. And when we look since like a year ago, when we started our engagement with social media platforms, more particularly in July 2023, we were hoping for the tech companies to take that on a serious note. Our first communication to them was, hey, heads up, we are ahead of a big year of democracy, and you have to do or to work on a country-specific plans that take all the risk in mind, in the consideration. What are you planning for? And since then, we, like all the previous year, we didn't hear from them. We didn't hear back. The only thing that they've done, they announced, a couple of them, they've announced on their blog post how they are planning for the global elections year. But in those global elections year, they only highlighted the United States. So they were speaking about the United States elections last November that is happening this autumn, which is basically a year before. However, with the rest of the countries, nothing was mentioned at that time, and we are seeing blog posts just before, like a few days before each election is taking place, which basically means that this is too late and this is not a protective measure. And even if you deep dive and those blog posts are not really showing any transparency about the new investments made to protect people from disinformation, misinformation, AI generated content, gender-based violence, tech harms such as hate speech and violent speech, incitement against minority groups, that led us to witness different spread for tech harms that is leading people to polarization and to extremism in different countries since the beginning of this year. Since the beginning of this year, we were looking closely into elections in different countries such as India, Pakistan, Taiwan, Bangladesh. Later on, there was also elections in Mexico, South Africa, and the EU, among other places. And unfortunately, those places, like, we haven't witnessed something major to say that they've done the work. Nothing have been really done to protect people and democracy from tech harms. And in those places, we've witnessed the spread of paid ads. In some of those places, we've witnessed the spread of paid ads, where those ads were misleading and spreading disinformation. In some countries, such as India, we've witnessed incitement against some minority groups like the Muslims. In India, we've also witnessed that the sons and the daughters of certain politicians in certain countries, such as South Africa, were also spreading this information and were involved in propaganda campaigns. So we are speaking about the lack of an enactment of those platforms to protect people and their democratic rights that is leading us to violence in those different countries. And again, whenever we're speaking about those countries, some of them are democracies, and some of them part of the biggest democracies in the world, such as India. It's one of the biggest democracies in the world. So if we just like have a second to think about that and then reflect on our region, because I believe we are here to speak about our region, where there is even no democracy, or we do have sham democracies where elections are just taking place to say that we have elections in certain countries. Unfortunately, we are expecting a mess in the second half of the year, where elections are expected to take place in Tunis and Algeria and in other places. One country that got elections in December 2023 was Egypt, and at that time we've seen how not only the tech harms caused by the social media platforms, but also the lack of democracy and the dictatorship that is taking place there was also undermining the whole electoral process. And we've seen how there was like different violations to undermine the participation of other candidates who were planning to run for elections, such as Tantawi, among others. So this is, again, we're speaking about Egypt that has over 100 million people. So, and this is like one of the biggest country in our region. So we need to think now together, and I'm glad that we're all here from the MENA region to have some thoughts around what's gonna be happening during this like the next few months, where unfortunately Tunisia, which was supposed to be the only lasting democracy in the Middle East just before Kais Saied started cracking down on the civil society organizations and actors. So no one knows literally how tech companies are planning to protect people and their democratic rights. And I'm not going to say people and democracy, because there is no democracy in the Middle East, unfortunately, during those elections. And whenever we're speaking to them, because we've spoken to them about the Egyptian elections last year, they were, can you please escalate those cases to us? As if the civil society is just working for those companies, as if we are working to report to them as a whack-a-mole game, to take case by case this tech harm. We're not doing that. Our mission is to protect people and democracy. It's not to report to social media platforms to tackle their lack of investment in their platforms. And just lastly, I will be concluding by this. The most disappointing thing is, since we started, or before even we started calling on them and telling them about this biggest year of democracy, nothing we're hearing about but new layoffs in the tech companies. And the bad thing is those senior executives in the companies are calling those years where they are laying off tens of thousands of people are years of efficiency. Especially Mark Zuckerberg, about last year in Meta, he called that a year of efficiency, where they were laying off people from their trust and safety teams. We've seen also Twitter dissolve their trust and safety council, among other lack of investment and layoffs that are taking place in the different platforms. I'll stop here, but I would be more than happy to elaborate on any point. Thank you so much, Emna, and others.
Thank you so much, Mona. It's really important to point at what's happening and what happened in other countries as we get, like you said, as we get prepared to our region. It's always heated in many ways, whether it's politics, it's the weather, it's everything. So let me go to the next speaker. So our next speaker is known by Abba George Salama. He's a diplomat at heart with over 20 years of experience. He's a seasoned international technology advisor. George was the Twitter regional director of public policy from 2016 to 2022. And in that position, he reinforced the Twitter's presence in the MENA region and beyond. He led strategic engagement with leaders, government, policymakers, regulators, law enforcement, civil society, and media. And he enabled significant policy reform that served the business evolution and sustainability. Before that, George was the head of public policy for MENA Telecom Council, an ICT industry council based in the UAE, where he was in charge of setting up, executing the council's policy plan and business strategies, and shaping the ICT industry growth. So without further ado, George is now the executive president of the Salama Group, and he will take us through the top challenges faced by the tech companies to do a better job in protecting the end users of their platforms. And he will also share with us the Salama Group's recommendation on limiting the spread of dis and misinformation during the times of elections. Up to you, George.
Well, thank you so much, Amna, and it's really great honor and pleasure to be with you today. And thanks for whoever is tuned in to attend the workshop today in such super interesting topic. I mean, year 2024 is elections year by far, with 2 billion people in 50 countries heading to polls this year. So we are delighted as the Salama Group to be with you today to share knowledge and insights and recommendations on such important topics. So basically, at Salama Group, we believe that in general, beyond the elections time in general, protecting the integrity of public conversation, and specifically during election times, this is it's a global societal problem. And to be very honest, this requires like a comprehensive solution that embraced societal, technological, regulatory, and ethical aspects. So underlining the importance of truth, transparency, and responsible use of technology during election times or even beyond, it's requires, like I mentioned, like a holistic approach that involves technological innovation, policy development, and even at some points international cooperation. And for focusing on social media, like in any public space, we will find definitely inspired ideas, but we at the same time we can find lies and deceptions. We find people who want to unite, but at the same time we find people who want to divide. And I believe tech companies must not consider taking into account any political viewpoints, perspectives, party affiliations on their policy making and enforcement decisions as well. Well, so again, back again to the public conversation, which is never static, and focusing on tech companies during elections, facing issues like abuse, harassment, trolls, propaganda, whether through automated bots or by human coordination, disinformation campaigns. These all should be adopted with philosophy that at Salama Group, we believe this philosophy should be based on two pillars. Number one is to make it easy for people to find credible information. And number two is to limit the spread of potential harmful or misleading content. Well, from that, let me highlight like 8 specific challenges that tech companies and based on my prior life at X, formerly Twitter. There are like I find that we have like clear challenges for tech companies that need to be addressed. Number one, misinformation and disinformation. And the rapid spread of false information, especially when it comes on social media platforms, can definitely negatively influence the public opinion and hence election outcomes. Number two is content moderation. Content moderation is a very big question mark. I mean, keeping the balance between removing harmful content and protecting freedom of expression is a huge challenge because of the enormous amount of content across all those platforms and the cultural differences in what is considered offensive and what is not. Add a layer of complexity to the content moderation aspect. Another important point, number 3, is privacy and data security. I mean, we found like data breaches, personal information loss, and this definitely harms the trust of people and users with tech companies. And in parallel, we are witnessing like a huge growth on regulatory requirements across different jurisdictions where tech companies need to comply. For example, you have CCPA in California and US, we have GDPR in Europe. So this add much more burden on the tech company side. 4 is the neutrality of algorithm. So we believe that at some points we find that algorithms are somehow biased, which can reinforce again like social stereotypes, discriminate against specific minority groups, and definitely this can lead to unequal access to services and hence can negatively affect the elections period. Number 5 is digital literacy, and this is something that it's really close to our heart at Salama Group, is to building and raising awareness, because I mean a significant portion of the population, especially in developing countries and in the Middle East, we lack the skills of a critical assessment of online information and content we are exposed to, which can definitely be a challenge for tech companies. 7 is monetization versus ethics. As you are aware, I mean, social media platforms and tech companies heavily rely on engagement-driven models to promote content, increase user engagement, and hence growth in advertising revenues. So that challenge between ethical aspects and monetization, and this I will highlight in the second part of my intervention about the solution to handle this. Number 8 is cybersecurity or cyber attacks, and how tech companies should stay ahead of bad actors and cyber security threats in such sophisticated, hugely developed landscape. We are talking about, like, we have seen and witnessed like some foreign interferences in specific elections across the globe, and every now and then we see unforeseen risks coming from cyber attacks. So basically, those are the 8 main challenges that we see at Salama Group are important to tackle or are facing the tech companies. So talking about the solutions again, and I mean the solutions are we have like a variety of solutions, but I believe an important aspect for tech companies, and by experience, I see that it's important first to align internally in a cross-functional manner across all teams within one company or platform during time of elections, and during my time at X, formerly Twitter. I mean, we had this effort led by the council, or specifically the public policy team, in alignment with legal partnerships, sales and product teams, following like a very clear internal elections playbook, where every team is capable and is aware about what are the objectives and key results expected during such important time. So we believe to limit the spread of disinformation and misinformation during election time, tech companies should rely on 7 specific strategies. Number 1 is enhanced detection and moderation. We spoke about the balance between removing harmful content versus maintaining the freedom of expression, and enhancing the detection can not only rely on machine learning tools and artificial intelligence, and maybe we will talk more about the role of AI later on, but I believe the hybrid model is highly needed. The role of human moderators, to employ teams of human moderators, especially with expertise in elections related content, to review and flag content, is super important. Number 2 is fact-checking partnerships. This is super important because, I mean, collaboration with independent partner fact-checking organizations to verify the accuracy of content and promote verified information and label false ones is very important. And I mean, automatically now this is moving. I mean, we see on a platform like X the introduction of community notes to add additional context when there is like some question mark on specific content. Recently, last week, YouTube now is currently testing the adoption of product update like community notes in X. Number 3, transparency and accountability. Again, when we talk about the commercial versus or monetization versus ethical challenge, and it's important as well to put a clear strategy when it comes to political advertising, and I believe that ads transparency is super relevant strategy or solution for tech companies here. For example, asking advertisers to disclose their funding sources or what are their target demographics, etc. Content labeling as well, when it comes to label content from official sources. For example, this is like state-controlled media source, whether versus like suspected bots or manipulative network. And I believe in 2019 we worked closely with digital Citizenship in supporting the presidential elections in Tunisia on ground. And I recall we launched a specific hashtags for the elections with branded emoji with the Tunisian flag to promote, and it was like a type of indirect flagging of credible content at the time of elections back in 2019 in Tunisia. Number 4, user education and literacy. Again, we mentioned we are in a part of the world where we don't have like 100% digital literate population, and it's important, and this is part of the responsibility of tech companies to launch educational initiatives to help users to identify this information and to understand the importance of critically evaluating online content. And again, back to the Tunisian elections, because we spent like lovely, unforgettable moments at that time. We conducted at that time like a dedicated workshop for journalists to help journalists on how to report news during election times on Twitter platform at that time. Number 5, collaboration with authorities. And yes, collaboration with authority is much needed during election time. We need to, I believe, tech companies need to work closely with election authorities, even with cybersecurity agency, to share information and to understand if in case of any emerging threats that happen and how to respond to those threats, especially in time of crisis. Develop to maintain like a specific protocol to manage crisis during election times. For example, how to respond to like a spike in misinformation incident, etc. Number 6, policy enforcement and user reporting. Like Mona mentioned, that tech companies are requesting NGOs and associations to report content on a case-by-case scenario. I mean, policy enforcement and user reporting is super important, and it's an integral part of the responsibilities of tech companies to establish clear guidelines, especially, for example, election-related ones, and to make sure that the reporting tools are easy for people to report and to have a timely response when it comes to reports on that matter. Number 7, again, part of the recommendation to face those challenges is how to detect manipulative behavior like bot detection and removal of automated content. I believe it's important for it. I mean, tech companies, they own the tech, they are doing great in terms of product development, and this engineering and product development need as well to be adopted in detecting or implement advanced bot detection systems to identify and remove any inauthentic accounts that amplify disinformation or misinformation. In addition to what we call at Salama Group is behavior analysis. It's important again to use behavior analysis to distinguish between legitimate users' activity and coordinated manipulated effort. So I will stop here, identifying like 8 challenges with 7 recommendations, and we're happy to receive any questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. This is really interesting and important, and I think digital citizenship, as part of the Global Coalition for Tech Justice, we would be working with MENA and Digital Action on enhancing and enlarging this list of recommendations to go back to the tech companies that we're constantly in conversation with. It's a thorough list. Yes, Mona, if you want to speak, yes.
It's just I'm gonna be challenging George for just one thing, which
Yes.
is collaboration with governments and security bodies. It's quite, from my point of view, it's quite problematic in our region, especially where authorities are committing or being involved in silencing political opponents, journalists, and anyone who's trying just to express their opinion. But rather, I would agree with you on the collaboration with the electoral bodies, because they need to understand what's going on in the different countries. They need to understand the context, and they need someone who's giving them context about the elections itself in the countries. So I think electoral bodies is different, and if they are really independent and working or operating independently, then it's different than collaborating with authorities and with security bodies. And it's going even beyond the securitization of digital spaces, as is happening, unfortunately, in some of our regions. But again, this is my opinion, and I just wanted to challenge George a little bit.
Do you want to respond now, George?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, always a great pleasure to be challenged, especially by Mona. And look, I mean, yes, I mean, when I mentioned authorities and I specifically mentioned cybersecurity entities, I was focusing mainly on the cybersecurity threat that may affect elections on the digital front. And maybe maybe at Salama Group we are talking about like we are seeing this on a holistic approach on 2 billion people across 50 countries. So yes, I agree with you at some point in time. Tech companies as well. I'm not sure if this is still in place or not, but they used to we used to be having like the transparency report where companies from the sake of transparency disclose all the requests coming from government authorities. I believe this is something that needs to be in place and to enable much more transparent process, whether during the time of elections or at any point in time. Transparency should be an integral part of any decision taken within tech companies.
I do agree. Transparency is important, and then we will hear from the most transparent person, as we give him a nickname in Tunis. But one thing, collaborating with authorities is the key to the tech companies, because they have to be aligned with every country they work in, the law in charge. But from a human rights perspective, it's very challenging for us to work on. We have to find a balance somehow, and we will work together on challenging them, challenging ourselves, for the sake of the users, the internet users. And so I'll move on to the third speaker, Ashraf Awadi, a Harvard Kennedy School fellow. Ashraf started a campaign in 2011 called Go Vote, inciting people to go and vote in the not elections at the time. It was the elections specifically for the Constitutional Assembly. And then he founded iWatch, which later became an established young non-governmental organization that operates across Tunisia, and that is the Tunisian chapter of the Transparency International organization. He represents the Tunisian civil society in the United Nations Convention of Anti-Corruption, and he has been involved in observing and monitoring elections, whether lively in the centers, the voting centers, or online. And so Ashraf will present to us the impact of social media in the Tunisian and North African context, but from his background and previous work observing the elections in Tunisia and the work that George mentioned earlier, and given us basically the digital trends that are shaping the upcoming elections in Tunisia. Up to you, Ashraf.
Thank you, Emna. It's always a pleasure to join you. It's always difficult to speak after George, though. Like he stole my line. I was trying to start with the 2 billion people going, but it was definitely a very good transition, because what I'm somehow still, I feel like there's something still we don't get. We thought that 2 billion people would go vote. A billion of them, more than a billion, already went to vote, and we feel like it's been 6 months. Half of the elections are over. The big ones, somehow India is over, and we did not recognize the usual patterns. Nothing was happening. Not so many Cambridge Analytica kind of scandal, and that made me think: are we facing, or are we expecting the same challenges, but maybe other things are happening? Before, when we talk about elections, we always say like elections won't be rigged the same way. Like there will not be added new votes, or they won't be replacing the other votes. They always make disenfranchising people as a new technique, or they might make a law to change the rules of the game. And sometimes I feel like this time I don't feel like that will be the usual work. That's gonna be always there, of course, like the spreading fake information and fake news, and that's gonna be there. But I feel like now the issue is that the platforms are being used for the past 5 years, just getting people ready to have far right governments. So for me, at a certain point, I don't feel like there is a conspiracy against the user. I feel like the platform was there just to convince the users to go to the extremes. The way that they needed to get it orchestrated, I feel like no, this time they have the time, they have the open platforms, they've been advocating and spreading their own agenda. It's not fake anymore. to the point that you got Modi in India, you got Qais Said in Tunis, and you get all those far people, right people in the in the EU. We did not expect the French elections to happen. We have an extra one now, and expected to have the far right. So the idea is, to what extent the people are no longer packaging their opinions behind fake news. Now they have at least the credit of going to the people and say, you know what, we're racist, and it seems like people like it. And then the idea that, and what I think George mentioned is very important, the we should not only study the behavioral part of, is it an organic or is it a bot. Now maybe we need to study the the extreme that somehow is going to the surface. I remember in the 70s there was this anthropologist, Levi Strauss, who spoke about the threshold of tolerance. And is there a threshold of tolerance after which people, they become xenophobic? And is social media actually pushing that boundary of? So I don't know. So I feel like the idea of the users being manipulated the way it happened between 2016 to 2020, maybe now we have people with more their faces out there saying things the way they are, not making them fake news. The other perspective, I think that looking back, I feel like we're treating the user as the victim most of the time. He's a victim of the conspiracy, he's a victim of fake news. But to what extent he's part of the game? To what extent the user has the agency actually to deliberately share the fake news or create the fake news? And seeing how the power dynamic change, and how the pro government people, they change their perspective, how those, like, all of a sudden in Tunisia, those who were in power, now they're advocates of human rights only because they are victims of human rights abuse, and those who used to be the victims now are advocating for the prestige of the state. So to what extent the user is not really a victim? So for me, what I want to advocate for, that I feel like the user has the agency, and most of the times people, they do share fake news because it sounds rational, but most of the times we cannot deny that there are people who will share the fake news that serves their interest. They will not share the fake news that will discredit their favorite candidate. So that deliberate will of playing the game comes with the user, and that's another point that I definitely join George around, which is the importance of media literacy. The importance of media literacy, you protecting yourself. But again, how can we protect the people from you? Because the media literacy is you not being the victim of that propaganda campaign. But what about you deliberately, with your full agency, deciding to spread the rumors because it's going to favor your candidate? I'm not saying that you are a bad person. You're just someone who believes that his candidate is the best for the country, and they will try to help spreading that fake news. So for me, I would say that we go back also to the ethics of the public space. I feel like what social media did is democratizing free speech, democratizing people giving their opinion, but it brought a lot. And it's nice to have that democratized, but it comes also with a price, which is people having their biases, people having their own opinions. So for me, the two things, maybe the two perspectives that I've seen myself somehow developing compared to the technical work I used to do in 2019 with iWatch, is really not seeing the user as the ultimate victim, but also believing that he or she, they has the agency to decide and play the game. And the second one, definitely for me, is thinking that there will be no plot or conspiracy or plan like the Cambridge Analytica. I feel like by the time the elections are happening, people there entrenched, they pick their sides, and the far right extremes all over the world, actually, they are winning. The good news, if you see the Polish elections, or you see more or less the elections in Mexico, people will go to the extreme, like in the US or in Brazil and Tunisia, and then they go a little bit moderate. So I hope that would be the case, that the the user or the voter, they always have that kind of balance. They go extreme, but they tend to go back to the center. But this is not guaranteed. This is not guaranteed, because if you see the European elections, it sounds and feels like the 1920s all of a sudden. And then it's just, is it history repeating itself with different tools? Is it Goebbels' propaganda in the 20th century. Now it's going to be Zuckerberg's propaganda. So it's just sometimes it's a historical pattern. And if we reason from the past, we feel like it's happening again. But for me, I feel like it's very important to take with the tech companies. But I think we're letting the user get away with it because I feel like they have the agency to play this game in a dirty way. Then if I'm going to talk about the tech companies, I feel like if you ask them, they'll tell you we're doing our best. We're doubling the number of the content moderators. We're doing this and doing that. But I feel they're a company. They will not hurt their business model. But seeing what happened since October 7th and the big investment in sanctioning pro-Palestinian content, I feel like if they want something, they can do it. It's just they can mobilize the resources they want. They can have their algorithms. So I I I think that the tech companies somehow is is a it's I don't know, it's like that bad thing that you need to work with. Unfortunately, they have the resources if they want to, but they don't want to invest those resources. Um, they will provide you with fewer resources. I remember Facebook in 2019 gave us CrowdTangle that it helped, but that was not really helpful. We asked for the ads library. We wanted who paid for this, and then they did not care because Tunisia is not big of a market. So for them, they still have that mindset of a corporate that's managing everything. How important the government is. All the reforms they did after the U.S. elections, it's because only the U.S. But in Myanmar and other countries, Facebook led to genocides and nobody cared. So I feel like the politics of these big corporates will always be there. And that's why for me, I feel like we should try to work with them, but there must be a solution without them. And for me, media literacy is somehow a way, but we need to do the media literacy also treating the user as a player, not as a victim. And they should live with the shame actually of sharing the fake news because we always say, yeah, they're a victim. They shared it because it sounded rational. I feel no, most of the times it doesn't sound rational. It just serves their agenda. That's why they share it. And I don't think they share the fake news that doesn't serve them. So that's for me another perspective, which is that we need to put some pressure also on the users and treat it from an ethical perspective, not only the media literacy.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. Always controversial, always going in the other direction and pushing us to think and see from a different angle. I agree with you to a certain extent. And here I allow myself to give my opinion that the users, yeah, they have their part in the game. Absolutely, they do. And what we see and we approach as harmful content, sometimes it is a reflection of the world, the real outside world, outside of the cyberspace. Racism happens outside and it's amplified on the social media platforms, unfortunately. What we or I do not agree with is that they are doing their work, they are trying to double the number of content moderators or whatsoever. Actually, they are not. They in a private conversation that we had with one of the tech companies, they said whatever budget they put in the elections from 2016 is the same. They're going in it. They are not doubling for this year, although the number of elections is more than 50, like we said, and like billions of people are going to vote. And another thing, other than the user being part of the game and serving their own interest in most of the cases and buying that narrative and changing their, or actually it changes their views to a certain extent, it impacts a lot the turnover of voters. That's one of the impacts that we observed in the elections. Like, because of the division and the polarization you all talked about in the content, people decide to disengage from politics and from the public life and civic life and not go to vote. So the vote turnover is so low in many countries, including ours, Tunisia. Right now, I want to ask you all a question, and then we can also circle back on certain things. You briefly touched on this, the generative AI. So with the emerging generative AI, there are threats to the cyber or civic space that is increasing. How can we mitigate this risk? And so my question for Mona is, how can we mitigate it from an organizational point of view? And to George, what do you think the tech companies should engage ethically with the generative AI to limit the spread of misinformation and disinformation, whether we like it or not? We might like the pop wearing hip hop outfit, but does it serve or does it harm? Different pictures of Trump, it serves an agenda. For example, when Trump is arrested, it serves an agenda and an interest of certain people who are against Trump. Does it serve or harm? Those are questions that we need to ask, and ask the tech companies and challenge them to be ethical. And the third one is, Ashraf, from the user perspective that you put in the game as a game player, and a crucial component of this worldwide game, what do you think the generative AI is doing for these users? So whomever wants to start first. Mona?
Pick one for the team. Okay, I can start. Speaking about generative AI is a bit controversial, because some people, as you said, would be asking, does it harm to see Joe Biden doing this or this candidate doing this? But looking deeply in the MENA region and on previous elections that happened in Iraq, Kurdistan, Tunis, and other places, where certain female candidates, women candidates, were withdrawing their candidacy totally just because they were smeared and some fabricated videos for them were spread online, is the main question that I'm gonna start with to speak about the AI generative content before just looking at anything. Our safety as women, and I'm gonna be here focusing a little bit on gender-based violence, because living in a very conservative societies where women are always smeared just because they are participating in the public sphere or in the democratic process, or they are trying to seek change in those countries, is not questionable but is tiring, because it's also creating the chilling effect for other women who would be interested or who are still starting their career or their pathway in politics and in public sphere, and then they are seeing some women are withdrawing their candidacy because there is a sex tab or there is an AI generated video that has been spread online, and those women, some of them are unfortunately threatened to be killed under the so-called honor crime in this society, just because they are living in patriarchal conservative society who's seeing in their public participation as a threat. So starting from like this point would lead me to speak about AI generative content on the platforms, where it's part or it's exacerbating the spread of disinformation, and it's make it easier, because it's not like before. Whenever we were speaking about disinformation and bots, we were thinking about the regimes behind that, like which parties are involved and who's doing what. But now even the normal user, and we're seeing this in the ongoing crisis that is going on in the Middle East, where some people, like, we knew that white phosphorus was used in the ongoing war, but people were going to get white phosphorus AI generated content to spread that online. Why? There is already documentation for what's going on. Why you are doing that? And then when there's like a research on mis and disinformation, they would be saying, yeah, but there's also Palestinian disinformation. It's happening because people are lacking aware of what they can do on using the documentation of of war crimes that they are already having in their hands, but the pictures are not in the high quality as they want them to be. So they are going to get some AI generative content. So looking in the into the different dynamics in the MENA region, looking at how the context is very sensitive to have certain content, especially against the queer communities and feminists who are taking place and participating in this public sphere, is really crucial. And social media platforms or big tech are not, unfortunately, investing more resources to show us how they are combating disinformation and tackling the AI generated content that is used already in different elections. And we've seen that in the Asia elections that happened since the beginning of this year. It was part of the election campaigns. And here we can look into Ashraf's question. If it's like, if we are making cartoons like, or cartoonish candidates, how's that gonna serve the or your question, Amna, how's that gonna serve the election campaign? But again, we're not living on Mars. We're living here in the MENA region, where we are facing real threats of using AI. And this unregulated industry in the MENA region is, unfortunately, is not helping us. It's even exacerbating the situation whenever it comes to the tech harms that are resulting from the use of AI generated content. And again, who's responsible? And I'm not here saying that civil society is responsible for that. No, civil society is not, or we are a player party. We're doing part of the job, but like, again, we are in this big year of democracy. We are speaking about big players, people who are making multi-billion dollars annually, like big companies who are not investing really any resources, any meaningful resources to protect people. Uh, I mean, those are new technologies. So we can't just look into the users and say, ah, yeah, they are involved. They are involved, but because there is no proper media literacy that's taking place in schools and universities, and later on, even if they are just sitting in home, where's the media literacy for those people? I mean, there is a responsibility, and the huge responsibility is standing there. And this is basically leading us to question what our governments also do to push social media platforms to tackle such harmful content, and how that is impacting the real life that we are living in this region, like with even certain parliaments. And we've seen that live. We don't need AI generated content. We've seen some parliaments in the MENA region who publicly were calling on certain women just to stay silent during parliament sessions. We've seen like videos that went viral, and then people were making comics, they were making stickers about that. We can give endless examples on such cases. So this is the life before AI generated content. So I can't even express my feeling toward the new coming AI generative content and its impact on the public life in our region, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Mona. Yeah, we've seen it all in our region. I'll move to George and then Ashraf.
Well, for the sake of time, I believe at a point in time, humanity needs only the I in AI. Let's put away the artificial and let's focus on intelligence first. From tech companies' side, AI, I mean, implementation and adoption of AI technologies was not something new. I mean, this has been in place years back. What is different now is that this technology now is moved from labs and tech companies to the public. And once you have the technology out for public use, controlling how public will adopt and use and develop such tools for the benefit of humanity, even beyond, again, the concept of elections, is a super important question that need again to be addressed in across different manners. And for example, like exactly 3 months back, 21st of March, at Salama Group, we issued an open letter for everyone. We named it AI for All, and we are calling all stakeholders who are working on the AI fronts, whether tech companies, private sector, academia, civil society, to agree on specific principle to develop, to test, to adopt and govern AI based on for the benefit of humanity, based on innovation, safety, and responsibility. And we are when we focus, let me get a sharper focus on AI during election times. I believe a very critical element here is data bias. And as you are aware, I mean, the quality of AI tools and applications relies mainly on the quality of the trained data set. So I believe tech companies should monitor and audit the quality of the data set that their systems are trained on. So basically, AI trained, if AI systems are trained on biased data sets, this will definitely reinforce and amplify the existing societal biases and division, especially during time of election. So it's important to ensure that the trained data set is transparent, non-biased, and diversified as well. The second aspect, again, when it comes to content during time elections, I believe it's important to focus on the what is called echo chambers. I mean, relying heavily and let algorithm and AI to just amplify content based on specific signals that machine only can recommend is super alerting and the warning behavior. I mean, AI algorithms designed to maximize the user engagement, like I mentioned earlier, to create those echo chambers by recommending specific content against others, and this is based on user previous or existing beliefs. And again, this will reinforce bias and societal division. Allow me to conclude my intervention today, for the sake of time, that again, I believe we all agree that elections are the cornerstone of any democratic or democracy process, and tech companies, they do have the power to shape somehow the public discourse on the digital landscape, and with that power comes a profound responsibility. And let me end by a quote by Albert Einstein. He mentions that whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, George, and up to you, Ashraf.
I don't know. For AI, I feel like again, it's a historical pattern. There will be always innovation. The innovation would have the negatives and the positives, and I feel like we are very focused on the threats that AI will be creating, and I feel like we're missing the opportunities that might create for us. I mean, what in a let's say, in which way can we think that we can use AI to help us build transparency or to help us work on more aware and educated voters? I feel like the risk is there, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And like all over the world, you hear a lot of people trying to stop or limit AI, and that's not going to be the solution. AI will boom, and there will be always people trying to use it for the good, and people will use it for the bad. And I feel like if we take the conversation just focused on the negative aspects of AI, my fear that we miss the opportunity of using it in a good way. Most of the debates, even here at the Kennedy School, like everyone is talking about the threats of the AI, and you rarely, once every 10 speakers, you'll find someone who will tell you, "This is the opportunity." I don't remember attending any speech speaking about the importance of AI. And here, somehow, I feel like people who work on cybersecurity are driving the conversation, and that's why they put their claims forward. And it's always the national security guys speaking about AI and democracy. And I feel like the human rights activists, we also are a little bit caught into that crossfire, and we are somehow leaning towards being afraid of AI. And I feel like crypto was very helpful in helping people in China. Blockchain was very helpful all over the world in guaranteeing transparency of the elections. And I feel like every time there is innovation, we should accept the fact it's bigger than anybody else. That's innovation, that's history. And there will be always bad people trying to use it for their aims. And we should also think that we are trying to be on the right side of history, and we need to use this opportunity. So I feel like more voices should be also speaking about the threats, but it should be also balanced with people speaking about the opportunities, because the threats are there. Like now, like deep fake videos can make elections go wrong, but at the same time, I feel like they're just small entities. I remember the picture of the Syrian kid who died, changed the elections in Canada, and this is not fake. This is humans with their genuine human feelings. They can change things. So it's not all being fake, but at the same time, I feel like it's very important for us not to miss the opportunity and start working on it right now, because the threats will be there.
Thank you so much, Ashraf, George, and Mona. We know we're at the hour or a little bit further. I invite you all to visit the Salama Group open letter and join it. Visit the campaign website yearofdemocracy.org. And if you're an Arabic speaker,